Hello and welcome back to Rule the Game. Today I'll show you how to play Point City by Molly Johnson, Robert Melvin, Shawn, Stankewich, and published by FlatOut Games and AEG. Point City is for 1 to 4 players. It lasts about 15 to 30 minutes and it is starting at age 10. It may well be that you already know Point Salad, and obviously they're related, they're by the same authors, but this game is a little different from this game, as you will see once I explain it. Please note that I won't explain the solo mode here. For the solo mode, please have a look in the instructions. You'll find all the information there on how to play that. In Point City, you're trying to build a city that contains a lot of victory points and that forms nice pairs and nice combinations that give you extra points through bonus tokens that you have here. At the end of the game, everybody has a bunch of buildings, but also a bunch, or potentially some resources left. Resources are not really used anymore for the scoring, so we can take them away, put them down here, but the basics are the buildings that you have. You'll then add up the victory points that are on your buildings here. Those are these numbers that you find here in these circles. So this person currently has 5 victory points. And then you'll add the points that you get from the civic tokens. In this case, that person also has a civic token that gives them 7 victory points right away. And then here, this person has also a civic token that gives them 3 points for each pair of a community and the economy. Here, this person has 2 communities and 3 economy cards. That gives 2 pairs of those together, meaning they get 6 points for that. So it's 6 plus 7 plus the 5 that we have, that ends up at 18 points. Should there be a draw at the end of the game, with 2 people having the same number of points, we then count whoever has the most resources left, and that person wins. To set up the game, you'll have to take the draw deck, sorted by color. So you see there are different shades of green here, there's blue that you have here, but also down here, these cards have 1 point, 2 points, and 3 points, and you sort them by that. Then you'll remove from each deck a certain number of cards from the game. You'll find the exact number in the instructions and also on this little setup aid that we have here. Once you've sorted them and removed the specific amount of cards, you'll take the third deck, turn it around, place the second deck on top of it, and finally, the first one goes all the way on top. You will then put that on the side as a draw deck, and you'll start setting up the game board. For this, you'll start always top left, and you work your way down to the bottom right. It's a 4x4 square that we're going to work on here. You then take out as many of the ingenuity cards here, the star cards, those are the ones marked with the white frame. You take out as many as you have players. Important is that you always have the starting player card in the number of cards that you're going to take out. Let's say we play for 3 players. That's 3 right here. We flip them around so you can't see the star player symbol. That was this one. You shuffle them. You hand out each player 1 card. They then turn it around to see who actually is the star player. Here it is. This is the star player here. Then you also take these bonus tokens here that you have. And you take out however many that you need for the number of players that you are. We are 3 players, I said here, so then we take out 12. You put them on the side here so that everybody can see them. Please note that I have the Kickstarter version again, so there might be some components that are slightly different from yours, but otherwise the game should be played the same way. Now we're ready to go. Let me show you how to play the game. This here is the board, what it could look like during the game. You'll see here the board still, but now you see we don't just have resources, but we also have buildings. And on this side, this player has already bought some buildings. Those are the light blue ones. And they also have some resources here. As you can see, some resources are just single resources, some are double resources. On your turn, you'll start with an optional move. The optional move is that whenever you have a row or a column in your board that is only resources, like this one is, you can decide optionally to flip around one of these resources into a building. Note that you cannot turn around a building into a resource. That's not possible. So optionally, you can do this. Your main action is that you can take 2 cards. You either take 2 cards from the deck or you take 2 cards from the board. You can't do a 1-and-1. 2 cards from the deck is really just you take those 2 cards, you add them to your cards that you already have, you add them to your resources. Alternatively, if I want to take cards from the board, I always have to take adjacent cards, so either horizontally or vertically adjacent cards. When I take 2 resources, not much really happens other than me taking those resources and adding them to my resources. If I want to take a building, I need to be able to pay for the building. I can take 1 building or I can take 2 buildings, but in any case, I need to be able to pay for all of them. Let's say I want to buy the town square. If I want to buy the town square, you see that the cost down here are 3 leaves. And you see that we have very different costs for the different cards. I do have 3 leaves here. I have 2 leaves here, and I actually have a building that produces a leaf. You see that here. Some of the buildings, as you can see here, they produce stuff. If you have bought such a building card, you're going to get whatever that card produces permanently. So you can use this resource in every single round. Now, unfortunately, I cannot buy these 2 cards because they will cost me 2 of these wheels, which I have, and 4 leaves, which I don't have. I only have 3. So if I want to buy this card, I would have to buy this card with one of these. And I decide to take these 2 cards. I then place the resource here on top of my resources, and I pay the resources the cost for this card, which is 3 leaves. I have 1 permanently, so I just need to pay another 2, which I have here, and I put that 2 on a discard pile. I then place the building here with my other buildings. As you can see, this card doesn't have a resource that it produces, but it has a civic building. This icon means that you can now take one of those bonus tokens that can either give you just bonus points, like this one, 5 bonus points, or bonus points for certain combinations. So in this case, you get 3 bonus points for all the pairs of wheels and communities that you have. I currently have just 1 pair that will give me 3 points. Let's say I take this one because I already have 2 pairs of community plus money. So that's 6 points. Next, we need to refill the board. We fill again from top to bottom, but now remember where you picked your resources in your buildings because you're going to replace them the other way around. This was a resource, so it will now be a building. This was a building, it will now be a resource. Once this is done, it's the next player's turn. You will see that during the game, there will be more and more of these ingenuity cards. Ingenuity cards are a wild card. The card that you get at the very beginning to start the game is already a wild card that you can use. You can use this to replace any resource that you don't have available to pay for a building. If you get confused a little bit during the game about where you have to place resources and buildings now, what you can do is you can use these tokens, when you pick up the cards, so let's say the next player wants to take these 2 cards, they can pay for this. Then you put down here a resource and a building, so that you remember what you just pulled, so that afterwards you will put a building here and a resource here. If you can't remember what was in the spot before, you can also use one of those tokens to toss it like a coin, and that will decide what it was. The game ends as soon as you don't have any cards left anymore on your draw deck to refill the board. At that point, every player should have had the same number of turns. And here are some hints for the first game. It depends a little bit on how many players you are. If you play this as duel, 2 players, then there are different ways you can win. You can start collecting cards with lots of victory points early on. You'll see there are some buildings that have 4 to 5 victory points on them. And then it's also a good idea to start collecting some interesting civic buildings very early. That will give you a lot of points right there. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, it is a better idea to start your game by collecting buildings that have permanent resources on them. With these resources, you get buildings cheaper later. You can buy more buildings, while it's kind of difficult, especially with more players, to collect more resources later on. And so if you don't have all these cards with the extra permanent resources, the other players are going to buy the buildings away from you, and they get a lot of points for the later buildings that come up in the game. Now you have to make sure that you don't miss the point where you have to move on from collecting resources to buying expensive buildings. So that, I would say, is maybe halfway through, but you'll notice that. And I think that's probably it. Of course, it makes sense to collect a bunch of cards from pairs that will give you lots of points through the civic tokens. So the civic tokens definitely give you a lot of points in the end. But if you get a lot of cards that have 4 or 5 victory points on them, you can also win the game without having those civic tokens. That's Point City. And if you liked the video, please come back and watch another one. I'm trying to post here new content all the time.